Okay, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. It's of course depend where you are. Welcome to another our roundtable. I tried to organize it earlier, but it did not work until early December. This roundtable is entitled "Armenia and France: Strengthening Ties Amid Regional Tensions." And let me first introduce our distinguished guests. Our first speaker is Marie Dumoulin. I hope you pronounce your last name correctly. Marie Dumoulin is the director of the Wider Europe program at the European Council on Foreign Relations. Prior to joining ECFR, she worked as a French career diplomat. She held a number of important positions in French diplomatic missions abroad, including Turkmenistan, Algeria, and Germany. And she was seconded to the German Foreign Ministry during the German OCSC chairmanship. She has worked with the policy planning staff CAPC and headed the Russian Eastern European Europe Department of the French Foreign Ministry. She has extensive experience with settlement process for protracted conflict in Europe Eastern neighborhood. She holds her PhD from Paris Institute for Political Science, Sciences Po. Our second distinguished guest is Ahmad Alili. Ahmad Alili is a researcher in the international public policy and regional security.
Brief introduction is good, Mikhail. Brief introduction is good. Brief introduction is enough, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. And Alexander Iskandaryan is prominent expert on politics, nationalism, and contemporary history of Armenia in the South Caucasus and Eurasia. He is political scientist and historian, and he is the director of the Caucasus Studies Institute in Armenia. And finally, myself, my name is Mikhail Mamedov. I hold my PhD in history from history department of Georgetown University. I have a master's degree from from George Washington University and diploma in history from Moscow State University. But how did I started my academic career at Azerbaijan State University, then Azerbaijan State University, and it was the reason how I moved to Moscow, and that is the reason why I became interested in this region, in this conflict. It was the same Karabakh conflict that brought me here. And I published quite a few pieces on the history of the Caucasus and the history of the Karabakh conflict. Thank you, and welcome to our roundtable. Again, the roundtable is entitled France, Armenia and France searching strengthening ties amid regional tensions. Now, my question is, I would like to start with Marie. Well, again, let me do something different. I would like everyone to state, just very briefly outline his or her vision of the situation in the region, what is going on, why this conflict is still going on, and what is the role of France, and what should we expect from France, very briefly, and then we will go in circles. Yeah, please, let's start with Marie, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Mikhail. Thank you for having me. If you allow me, I'll make a couple of brief remarks on the history of French engagement on this conflict, because I think it matters to understand where we are now. And there has been basically a change in the French reasoning for being involved with Armenia and on the Karabakh conflict specifically. From 1994 onwards, France was part of the OSCE Minsk group, and that was very much for France a way to exist as a European power alongside Russia and the US in this format, but also contributing to try and end the single interstate conflict on European soil since World War II, and strike the right balance between two fundamental principles of international order, i.e. territorial integrity on the one hand, and the right to self-determination on the other hand. So it was very much about European security and about international order. After the 2020 war, France increased its support to Armenia, especially in terms of economic and development aid, to strengthen the resilience of the country and avoid Armenia becoming a failed state. There was a strong support to Armenia's democratic experiment and attempts to activate the negotiation process, first in the framework of the OSCE Minsk group, and then as part of ad hoc discussion formats involving the EU, which was very much refused, or at least Azerbaijan very much refused French involvement, seen as too pro-Armenian. There's been a new change since September 2023 and Azerbaijan retaking control of Karabakh, basically because the initial dilemmas between territorial integrity and self-determination were not present in the same form and basically off the table. And the concerns were rather for Armenia's territorial integrity, with fears that Azerbaijan may try to push further its military advantage and try to establish militarily a land connection with Nakhichevan. Plus, France insisted very much on the right of refugees to return to their homes and on the necessity to preserve cultural legacy. There has been a continued work on economic resilience and the start of a military cooperation, in addition to the mobilization of European partners to increase the EU's involvement in support to Armenia. So where do we stand now? The French support to Armenia has triggered an unprecedented deterioration of French-Azerbaijani relations, although because of Azerbaijan's reactions, which took the form, maybe I will enter in more details later in the discussion, but basically there were information campaigns and interference in French domestic affairs, which the French didn't like at all. So I would say that there is a lasting bilateral crisis which now goes beyond Armenia.
Yes.
Maybe another point, and I will finish just after that. I think we must be very clear about France's ambition. The idea is really to support Armenia's sovereignty, strengthen its resilience, and not to replace Russia as a security provider. It's rather consistent with a broader French involvement in the region and a more active engagement of France and of the EU in the Eastern neighborhood since February 2022, basically. But it's not a major geopolitical shift for the time being. Now, we will probably get back to this in the discussion. I think this may have consequences beyond just Armenia. And it also depends on a lot of external factors that we can enter in more details in the discussion. I'll stop here probably.
Okay, thank you so much, Mary. Thank you. And now I want to ask Ahmad, how does this French involvement, more active French politics is seen in Azerbaijan? I want to jump a little bit forward. There is a lot of concern in Azerbaijan. We will go back to the same question in purchasing armament from Armenia, but Azerbaijan is purchasing arms from Turkey, from Israel, from Russia, even from Pakistan. And why is there so much concern that France is selling arms to Armenia? Well, I don't like. I would not be trading arms if I had such opportunity. I don't like, what is his name, Victor Bout, right? But in general, it's unfortunately it's quite a normal thing that people sell arms. Why is there so much concern in Azerbaijan that France is selling, how do you call this, propelled grenade? It's Caesar, I forgot what's the name of this equipment when they sell.
Yeah, Caesar, yes.
Caesar, yes.
Caesar,
Why is there so
yes,
much
Caesar
concern?
1-3 something, yes.
Yes, why is there so much concern in Azerbaijan? Can you tell us, can you enlighten us, please?
Okay, let's, for Azerbaijan, I would say that we have to, when we look at the things from Azerbaijan, we have to differentiate two major issues, right? Is it France or Macron, Macron administration? So it's very important question for Azerbaijan to this. The thing is, French-Azerbaijan relations, whatever is happening right now, it's not the norm of French-Azerbaijan relations. French-Azerbaijan relations were much more developed, especially since the 1990s. I believe that Azerbaijan, well, the main diplomatic victory for Azerbaijan was in the OSCE Lisbon summit, when all of the European countries basically confirmed that Karabakh issue is supposed to be resolved within the territorial integrity of Azerbaijan, and that the role of France as co-chair in that, French-Azerbaijan relations in that. It was quite important for Azerbaijan. Also, what happened during President Sarkozy and President Hollande times, I believe that is the highest point of the French-Azerbaijan relations. Basically, Azerbaijan could purchase quite, I would say that quite important, systems, even some defense systems from France that made Azerbaijan defense, increased Azerbaijan defense capability a lot, I would say. So in this sense, when we talk about the French-Azerbaijan relations, we have to understand that certain issues, especially in Azerbaijan, it's believed that it is President Macron and his team doing the French-Azerbaijan relations. So that's why in Azerbaijan, I would say that there is a certain expectations for post-Macron period and the French-Azerbaijan relations. Azerbaijan invested a lot to the cultural, let's say, sites in French. Azerbaijani French cultural relations were quite developed. And I can tell it like that. Also, Azerbaijan had a very important place in this regard for France, because France having quite intensive relations with the North African countries, with the Muslim background countries. The secular government, the secular state that we have in Azerbaijan, that's very much, this is when Azerbaijan and Armenia and Georgia, we established our first republics in the 1820s. That was the copy-paste of the European French model of the statehood. And so that is why Azerbaijan was in some way a model for the rest of the Middle East countries, that, well, this is the way of doing business also, right? So I believe that in that regard, French-Azerbaijan relations that has more components that we can see when we look at this at first. At the same time, French-Azerbaijan relations in terms of the cooperation on energy issues, on geo-economic issues, access to Central Asia, I believe this also were part of the Azerbaijan-France relations. And as I mentioned, the biggest problem occurred during the 44-day war, when President Macron called President Aliyev, and then after the end of the 44-day war, President Macron called President Aliyev also. And back then there was a very important phrase that let's turn pages. So, and back then it was between Paris and Baku. It announced that whatever happened in the past during the 44-day war, that's in the past, but let's move forward. But then when certain events took place, and with the European Union, Azerbaijan back then repeatedly labeled European Union mediation as honest brokership, and European Union mediation back then, European Union not having any historical public memory, imperial public memory in our region, from Azerbaijan side was considered as an honest broker. And then the Azerbaijani understanding of this issue was that whatever happened with the European Union mediation process that Azerbaijan would wanted to avoid, that was influenced by President Macron and his administration. And then Granada summit, and then certain phone conversations with President Aliyev. So this is all part of these relations. But right now there are quite, and it led to the certain, let's say, as anti-colonial. So it led to Azerbaijan picking this, let's say, non-European rhetoric about anti-colonialism. Right now, it's being used. This narrative is being used by Russia against, by China and Russia against Europe, and from European side, it's being used against Russia and the former Soviet Union. Also, well, in this sense, Azerbaijan kind of like that. I believe that was very. It came very natural for Azerbaijan to pick that side, especially if we take into account that Azerbaijan foreign policy is in transformation. The Karabakh conflict for Azerbaijan is over. Now Azerbaijan is looking for the new frontiers for its foreign policy, and Azerbaijan presidency of non-alignment movement was like the very productive for Azerbaijan. When all of those countries they could like that, Azerbaijan benefit a lot from that status. And even during the COP29, Azerbaijan also presented itself as part of those small forgotten group of countries whose voice needs to be heard. Azerbaijan presents itself as a country that can voice out those concerns in certain international platforms. In this context, it was very natural for Azerbaijan to speak, with on behalf of those countries, on behalf of those countries that a bit slightly forgotten of from Azerbaijan perspective, and it led to it created another cycle of the French-Azerbaijani patience in French-Azerbaijani relations. But we are here now. But again, I don't think that this is whatever is happening between Paris and Baku. This is the norm of these relations. These relations have seen much better days, and I believe that there are much more potential left, and these relations could be put back to the rails. It's derailed right now, but very easily can be put back to rails. We should not forget that for the last 10, 15 years, there are quite many people in France who understand the importance of Azerbaijan, and quite many people in Azerbaijan who understand the importance of the France and its influence in the region, and would love to build very constructive relations in this regard. But in Azerbaijan, most of the people they are keen to wait for the post-Macron period in France.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Alexander, and what do you think about current situation? How do you characterize this current situation, the French role in the modern conflict, in the modern politics in the South Caucasus, especially between Armenia and Azerbaijan?
I never worked as diplomat or as state official, so I would try, I'm pure academician, I would try to be as non-politically correct as it possible. Armenia now, if directly to answer to the question, I would say that Armenia now is in a period of moving from one myth to another. The first myth, which was before 2020, it was a myth about security, that Russia would provide security to Armenia, and Armenia would develop its relationships with Westerners, with Europeans. It failed. After 2020 war, Second Karabakh War, and especially after 2023, deportation of Armenians from NK, we're moving to another myth. Somebody else should help us to construct, to build our security, and you don't have really a lot of choices. And this somebody else should be the West, Europe, countries of Europe, something like that. And this, when you say Europe, very often in Armenia, you say about France. France is a very special country for Armenians. Armenians, not just Armenia. It's different. Sure, it's not about Macron or any politician of France now. It's about cultural ties. It's about traditional ties between these countries and societies. It's about Armenian diaspora in France. If you look from France, sometimes it's not about Armenia but Armenians. If you look at percentage, not just figures, but percentage, in France you have second biggest Armenian community in diaspora in the world.
World, yes.
In Russia and in United States, you have approximately 2 times more Armenians than in France. But by population, Russia is bigger than France 3 times, and United States are bigger than France more than 6 times. So this is second Armenian diaspora in the world by percentage. And this diaspora is old diaspora. It's not about people who came there yesterday. So you have a lot of ties. You have and I would say that in Europe, such kind of countries like Greece, France, and Cyprus are maybe more close to Armenians, but France is the strongest of that 3 countries. So France is special for Armenians. I don't think that Armenia. The key question for Armenia now, the most important question for Armenia now, is not, unfortunately, just economic development or what they call values, management, freedoms, changings, etc., but security. Security in wider terms. It's not just about weapons, not just about iron, it's about different types of security, political forms of security, hard security as well. Armenia, in sphere of hard security, Armenians try to build their relationships mostly with 2 countries. One of these countries is France, another one is India. It is just because you cannot do like it was before, to have your security from Russia. Russians are busy in some other place, and they don't think about South Caucasus now. So I don't think that it could be crucial that France alone can change dramatically all situation and security in Armenia. But first, I said we don't have a lot of choices, and France is a serious country, and somehow it can work on more stable situation in our region, which is important for Armenia. Maybe I stop here with answering this question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Alexander. Okay, I would like to go back to Marie. Marie, okay, one of the most important questions, you said that France is not going to substitute Russia or to overplay Russia, right? Do I understand you correctly? But there are different ideas I searched internet. There is some idea is that France is trying to find another place, well, in northwestern Africa. France, well, basically to a certain extent, France left. So is there this French politics in the South Caucasus? Is it motivated by some purely altruistic motives, or is it some kind of idea to rehabilitate itself for what did not work in northwestern Africa, or maybe it is just a result of Armenian diaspora in France? And another very important question is, shortly after the end of the Second Karabakh War, I know many Armenians in Armenia, they're very disappointed with this. French parliament voted to recognize Nagorno-Karabakh Republic, but the French president never signed this decree, so he never I don't know very well the French legal system, but my impression is parliament vote for something, the president should give his final approval for this decision, right? Do I understand it correctly? But Macron never put his signature to this law.
Okay, maybe I start with this question because that's the easiest one. In the French system, foreign policy is a prerogative of the executive power, not of the parliament. So the resolution was a declaratory document, not implying any consequences for foreign policy decision-making.
Yes.
The executive power didn't have any obligation to sign any kind of law recognizing the Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. And more than that, it would have been a serious blow to other positions of France on other areas. For example, the Luhansk and Donetsk republics,
Yes.
so-called,
But they were not okay.
in Ukraine. France is committed to territorial integrity. And I think that was one of the issues that were difficult between France and Armenia until 2023, the fact that there was, or at least until 2020, the fact that Armenia was de facto occupying what used to be the legal territory of its neighbor before 1991. This issue is not, there is a completely different equation on this now. And so it makes it easier for France to be fully committed to supporting Armenia's sovereignty and territorial integrity. And that's consistent with what France is standing in other areas of the world and in other parts of the former Soviet space. If you allow me, I will answer your first question, but I will also go back to some of the things that have been said by other speakers. I agree with what Ahmed said about the conjunctural nature of the crisis of bilateral relations between France and Azerbaijan. This was not the case before. We can hope that it will change in the future. This is also, I mean, France has also a very deteriorated relationship with Turkey over the last years, so maybe there is a connection between the two. But I would argue that there are also structural elements that need to be taken into account. One of them is what Alexander mentioned, the very special relationship between France and Armenia, with an important diaspora, but also very strong cultural and historical ties between the two countries. And I think that will endure. And that explains why France is so committed to supporting Armenia now and will remain so in the future, most probably. A second element that we need to be aware of is the very strong impact that Azerbaijani information campaigns have had for France. The fact that Azerbaijan interfered in the crisis in New Caledonia, which was extremely violent, and Azerbaijan basically poured oil on the fire. There was a campaign steered by Azerbaijan on social media. There is a very good report, by the way, by the French government body in charge of monitoring information campaigns on social media that was published just yesterday, and that documents very clearly how Azerbaijan was directly involved in such campaigns. And I think this will have long-term consequences because it is really interference in things that are already very complicated in France and that have direct domestic impact. So I don't think that even in a post-Macron era, that kind of things will be easily forgotten. Last element in the structural reasons for increased engagement with Armenia, it has to do with the impact of Russia's war on Ukraine for European security and the the much stronger interest of France for its eastern neighborhood. You mentioned the frustration about Africa and North Africa. I don't think this is connected. I think there is a real awareness in France that our security is directly impacted by what happens in Ukraine, but also in South Caucasus, and that there is a need for EU member states to be more active and more directly involved in these regions, because our security is at stake in Ukraine. And I would argue that the security of South Caucasus is also at stake in what is going on in Ukraine. The outcome of the war in Ukraine will have a very strong impact for countries of South Caucasus. I guess that's already what we can see in Georgia, that some political actors are betting on a Russian victory in Ukraine, while others are expecting a more active European involvement. So yeah, the outcome of the war will impact the situation in South Caucasus, but the situation in South Caucasus also directly impacts European strategic interests. And that's something the French have realized at least since February 2022. And that's, in my view, one of the reasons and one of the structural reasons why France will be more active in South Caucasus generally and supporting Armenia specifically.
Okay, thank you. By the way, I forgot to say, if you disagree with any of the speakers, if you want to correct, add, or comment on his or her statement, feel free to do that, please.
I can make a few comments on this.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mari. I don't know. Do you see me or not? Like I don't see myself. Right. Perfect.
No, I can see you.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, I understand. We were discussing certain issues with the French researchers, the other friends from France. I mean, there are a lot of concerns about these issues, and I believe that there is, and for some time there will be need for some platforms to clear out these problems between France and Azerbaijan. It requires extensive track 1, track 1.5, and the track 2 diplomacy, I would say, that right now between France and Azerbaijan to clear certain things out. At the same time, I would say that Azerbaijan expert community, there are a lot of talks that with the EU's increased presence between Armenia and Azerbaijan in the peace process between Armenia and Azerbaijan, that helped the things to move forward much effectively. And whatever we have today, that's also thanks to the Brussels, Paris, Washington involvement in these processes, right? So I believe that if not certain elements, Azerbaijan would love to have European Union mediation very active in the process. But then once you show that you are sympathizing one party more than the other one, right? And you kill the process. So now we have to think a bit counterintuitive, right? So that kind of support, that's good for Armenia or not good, right? Or I'm coming from a conference and we were discussing this issue that like this, if Armenia wants security, or as Alexander mentioned, that security can come in very shapes and forms. But if Armenia wants a security and Armenia believes that European Union monitoring mission is a guarantee for its security, so then so there is this issue like that. So you have to choose between European Union monitoring mission in Armenia or European Union presence in the peace process between Armenia and Azerbaijan, right?
Yeah.
So the thing is, European Union's presence in wider peace process and European Union monitoring mission in Armenia, that doesn't work together very well. And Azerbaijan, sorry?
One more time, can you say that European Union mission in Armenia and European Union mission in the Caucasus?
No, presence in the peace deal, right? Like the European Union mission's presence in the overall peace process and EUMA mission, right? So And although EUMA mission is a great in terms of increasing the European Union presence in South Caucasus geopolitically, but now we have to think that the one thing like the kind of kills the other one, right? So what is better option for Armenia? Having European Union monitoring mission in Armenia or European Union as an actor in the peace process, right? So you cannot have both of them at the same time. So then going back to the President Macron's decisions on certain issues, right? So it is if there is a pro-Armenian stand, what is better, right? So can sometimes the extensive display of love, can it hurt the peace process and kill the process or help it? So I believe in this case, there are so many instances that well, basically, sometimes you have to do some counterintuitive actions than acting very often. And the French diplomacy is quite good acting and like, finding quite good niches on certain issues. I'm surprised that this time, in this case, there were certain steps that it could be avoided it could be avoided easily. So, but again, there are certain issues that most probably in the upcoming years. And again, going back to this New Caledonian case, right? It came very natural for Azerbaijan because of this non-alignment movement presidency in the past. So now Azerbaijan, like whenever there is a problem with the, for example, during the COP29, there were problems with the financing of island countries. They were demanding certain. Azerbaijan immediately wanted to side with those countries and be voice for those countries. This is a new element in Azerbaijan's foreign policy. And then Azerbaijan tried this first time during the COVID restrictions. Back then, there was a shortage of the COVID vaccines, and the Azerbaijani presidency non-alignment movement, Azerbaijan kind of was empowered by this presidency to push certain issues, and they criticized the countries who would not deliver certain vaccines to those developing countries. So again, like this is not, I would say that there are so many other components of it, and we have to take into account all of these factors. Issues. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. I know we are running out of time. I mean, we very soon we should start picking up questions from the floor. So I want to jump a little forward. I want to ask you something. What is Azerbaijan? Well, Marie mentioned New Caledonia. My question is, what is Azerbaijan's interest in New Caledonia? Well, I saw people waving Azerbaijani flags in New Caledonia, having certain symbols on their T-shirts. Why? Well, New Caledonia produces nickel. Does Azerbaijan need nickel from New Caledonia? Georgi Derulgan was making fun of it. I mean, what is it like? How says like I knew one friend who said Manhara, New Caledonia Hara. Where I am? Where is New Caledonia? What is the interest in? Azerbaijan has so many problems inside, so many poor people, so many issues to address in terms of social security, healthcare. Why is there the need to waste money for New Caledonia?
That's question to me or to Alexander?
To you. I will start with.
I thought the meeting is called. Yes, the meeting called Armenia-France relations. So I would love to hear more, Alexander. But let me very briefly answer your question. Practically speaking, if you notice the New Caledonian flag and Azerbaijan flag, they are very similar. The colors are very similar. So that is why, like when you wave the New Caledonian flag, it is
go in different directions.
Yeah, yeah, but still, you can very confuse those flags, right? So, I mean, there are photos with the Azerbaijan flag on this. Yeah, but those flags, when you see those flags in abundance, it doesn't mean that all of those flags were Azerbaijan flags, right? So this is but let me tell you, like this is my best guess.
Yes.
What about certain actions? This is not new for Azerbaijan diplomacy also. Azerbaijani diplomacy is known for certain this kind of actions for, you know, in 1990s when Russian support to Armenia was quite considerable, and let's say it changed the course of actions at some places. Azerbaijan was not happy with that, and Azerbaijan would keep its borders loose. And we all know what happened in North Caucasus back then, right? Only when President Putin came to Baku right after the elections, now to President Haydar Aliyev back then, and then the borders got slightly, you know, the border security status increased slightly, and then the developments taking place in the North Caucasus and Armenia-Russia relations, Armenia-Azerbaijan relations also changed slightly, right? So for Azerbaijan diplomats, it's like that. It's finding a very soft spot for the of big countries and trying to show yourself there. So Azerbaijan tried that back in 1990s, I would say, and that's my best guess. Then this might be one of those strategies that Azerbaijan implemented in the past, and back then it was effective.
All right. Yes. Okay. Okay, Alexander. Do you know what is your guess about Azerbaijan and New Caledonia's relations? Do you have any idea?
Everybody know about it. Ahmed as well, and you as well, and Maria as well. Azerbaijan's struggle against colonialism will be non-understandable if it would be about Curacao or Gibraltar or I don't know, Puerto Rico or something else like that. You have a lot of islands in the ocean. New Caledonia is not about New Caledonia, it's about France. And it's about not just about France, but about French position on Armenia, about that question which we are discussing now.
Right.
It's a way to try to do something, at least in discourses, against France in Azerbaijan because of French position of Armenia and all this conflict around. That's it. I would say it's very simple, nothing to talk about.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Marie, and you, what do you think about? Because we have to switch to we have to start picking up questions very briefly.
I have nothing to add to what was just said. I think it's not about New Caledonia, it's really about France. And just to come back to what Ahmed said about the dilemma between supporting one side and being present in a negotiation, I would completely agree when it comes to France. I think the fact that France is supporting Armenia so strongly makes it a bad mediator for the conflict. I kind of regret it, but I also understand the reasons why France is so strongly supporting Armenia, and I also think Armenia needs the support. But when it comes to the EU, I would be more skeptical about your argument, because the EU mission is a monitoring mission, and in theory, it could have been deployed on both sides of the front line. Just one of the sides didn't want it, and so it ended up being only on one side. But it's not, in my view, a sign of a disbalanced approach by the EU to this conflict. And so in my view, the EU would remain a very useful and strong mediator in that issue.
Okay, thank you so much. I think now we should go to the questions from the floor. I guess, yes, I should go to chat, right? I'm sorry, can anyone help me? Should I go to
We don't
chat?
have questions still.
I think you should do
As I can see, we don't have questions.
Yeah, if there is no question, I can reply to Marie's last comment about.
Okay, go ahead. Yes, please.
No, we have discussed. Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Go ahead, Ahmed.
So sorry. Yes, if I interrupted. We discussed this issue, like that, why Azerbaijan did not agree with the UNA mission being deployed on Azerbaijan side in the past with Mikhail and Alexander. The thing is, Azerbaijan understands one thing very clearly, that back then in 2021 and 2022, the realities were completely different, and Azerbaijan wanted to, like, Azerbaijan didn't want any presence of the foreign troops.
What about Turkey?
Also including in that sense, Azerbaijan wants to have, because it's very, very, very fundamental idea for Azerbaijan that if you're a sovereign country, you have to be in control of your borders, you have to be in control of everything. And Azerbaijan believes that if Azerbaijan agreed to presence of the Russian troops in 1990s, the Karabakh War in 1990s would evolve in a bit different manner. So why Azerbaijan did not agree? It's a Russian mindset that once Russian flag is raised anyway, it should not go down. So Azerbaijan knew that if it lets in some European troops, it's going to be a clear signal to Russians that, hey, you guys, you leave Karabakh, you are going to be replaced by someone else. So that was something that Azerbaijan could not afford. Now Azerbaijan is the only country in Eastern Partnership which has no presence of any foreign troops, right? So for Azerbaijan, it's seen as a great achievement. So in this context, like it shows that strategically, the strategic vision of Azerbaijan right now was right in a meaning that it could free its area from the presence of any foreign troops, and now it's very proud that there is no presence of the foreign troops in Azerbaijan. So although EU monitoring mission is a great tool to increase the European Union's geopolitical presence in Eastern Partnership in South Caucasus, but there are certain sensitive moments that should be taken into account, and that this was one of those moments. And I believe that when those missions got extended, first it was a 2 month mission, then it got extended into the mission that takes like the 2-year mission now. There are some plans to extend that mission. Then in Baku, they are saying that even Putin doesn't act against Azerbaijan like this. So when sees there is the reaction from Azerbaijan, Putin steps back and takes troops out. So then Azerbaijan seeing European Union acting this way, it causes a lot of, let's say, dissatisfaction, I would say, here in Baku.
Yes, thank you. Okay, another question would be, my question would be also, what about this Azerbaijani, this GOP, how is it called, GOP 29, this meeting which was supposed to which took place in Baku recently? What was the reaction of Azerbaijan when the France decided not to attend? Was it purely politically motivated, this this environmental conference, do you think? What do you think? The French decided that they will not attend this.
It's me or Marie. Who should answer? I believe I'm speaking too much, so let Marie answer that question. I would love to hear you.
Yes, please.
But
Marie.
I can't speak about the Azerbaijani reaction. I can speak only about the rationale between the French decision, and I think it really has to do with this involvement of Azerbaijan in the New Caledonia issue.
Yes.
It's completely not related to Armenia. Well, it's indirectly related if you consider that Azerbaijan's involvement in New Caledonia had to do with French position on Armenia. But yeah,
yes, please.
It's just a testimony to the depth of the bilateral crisis.
Yes. Okay, that's good. Okay, I think I got one question. I would like to have a question also of, no, it's off topic, prefer recently. Recently, the Azerbaijani government declared that one of the obstacles to finalize the peace agreement in the Armenian constitution. Yes, no, I mean, it's not really about the topic. It's, do you know anything about, well, it's different question about the Armenian constitution. Maybe Alexander can answer. We talked about this, Alexander. What about the topic of Armenian constitution as a obstacle for peace? Agree for peace, as peace settlement between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Can you answer this question, please?
Maybe can I try to react to previous questions, and
Yes,
then
go
maybe shortly I would say about that, because this is not directly about Armenian-French relations or something.
right.
First,
Yes,
Ahmed asked me,
yes,
would it be better for Armenia to have a monitoring EU monitoring group, or to have EU in the process of negotiations on conflict between Armenians, Azerbaijan? Sure, both, even more. Theoretically, the best way for moving forward in this conflict would be to have as many actors from outside world as it possible. If you really want to go to peace,
yes,
by peace I mean not just no war situation, but to find concessional decision of this or resolving of this problem. Theoretically, it would be better to have Europeans, United States, Russia, I don't know, Iran, etc. Sure, in Turkey, it's impossible. It's absolutely clear. But to have so many actors from outside, especially if these actors are Europeans, would be better. Marie said already, this is just monitoring group.
yes,
They are on the territory of Armenia,
right.
and they just monitor situation and send result of their monitoring to Brussels, just to know how is situation on the ground. That's it.
Yes,
Kind of monitoring group between 2020, between the war, at least between the war and 2023. Azerbaijan had a territory just very close to Karabakh, if I'm not mistaken, about 3 kilometers from the borders, which was controlled by Armenians of Karabakh before 2020. So this is just about monitoring group, not more. And it would be good to have them, and it would be good to have Europeans in a process of negotiations, if and when it will be possible. This is uh, about monitoring group. I had something else. Oh yeah, the another question about COP, about this environmental conference in Yerevan. I'm not a great specialist on
Baku.
environment issues, but it was not about environment for Azerbaijan. If you look from Baku, it was not about environment. It was political action.
Right.
It
Yeah,
was political action, if I can say PR political action. It was done, and the goal, at least if you look to the situation from the region, was not about environment, but about showing how Azerbaijan can provide such kind of huge events at this territory. And the question about it was a question about by somebody uh, about constitution, but
yes,
this is one of the it's one of the parts of this war or terms uh, between Armenians and Azerbaijanis.
yes,
Everybody in Azerbaijan, maybe not everybody, but at least people who deal with that, they know that to change constitution in Armenia, you need referendum.
yes,
Everybody maybe in Azerbaijan understand that really it's not part of the constitution. Everybody in Azerbaijan understand that this act was in Declaration of Independence which was that time when Armenia as a state still did not exist. Was not exist, I'm sorry. Everybody in Armenia knows that if you want, you can find such kind of terms in in Declaration of Independence of Azerbaijani constitution. If you want to go to a solution, if you want to go to peace, you don't try to find obstacles and problems. You try to find consensuses. This is not the case, unfortunately, now. I talked already in one of the previous our meetings about that. I wouldn't go very deep, but the problem is, real problem is asymmetry of Azerbaijani and Armenian views on the process. It is different, and if it's that different, so you don't come to the uh, to the situation when both governments or societies or how to call countries try to find solutions, but try to continue conflict not with shooting but with wording. It's a reason of such kind of things, I would say.
Yes, very good. Thank you. Any comments on what Alexander just said?
My comments, I believe you expect.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. If you don't have any comments, we can.
No, but the thing is, again, like I'm coming up from another conference and I had a 40-minute speech to just explain why Azerbaijan tries to insist on certain issues, right? If very, very briefly,
Yes.
the peace deal right now, it's not like that. Azerbaijan understands one thing, that the peace deal right now, especially the clause about the international courts, that's not how Azerbaijan envisioned it. Armenia says that, okay, it's ready to withdraw the court cases, but it's not going to be responsible for any court cases that Armenian diaspora is going to start against Azerbaijan, right? So totally destroys the whole game for Azerbaijan. And I fully understand those Armenian colleagues who say that Armenia as a state, as a government, can do nothing when
As a
someone,
state.
yes, someone in diaspora can start certain court action against Azerbaijan, right? So Azerbaijan right now faces very same dilemma that it faced in the 1990s, when Azerbaijan and Armenia, they were proposed three deals, step-by-step package deal and the common state solutions. Two of them were refused by Armenia, and one of them was refused by Azerbaijan. Right? And usually the Armenian side would say that, oh, it's quite nice, and we agree with that, but what we can do? There are Karabakh Armenians, and you have to agree with certain issues with them also, right? So now the Pashtun administration, the Karabakh Armenians, they are not part of those let's say diplomatic uh, uh, negotiations, the issues. But now Armenian government kind of tells Azerbaijan that I like our agreement, I can sign it, but what I can do, like the diaspora is not agree on certain issues and they can start certain actions against you, right? So for Azerbaijan, it sounds like a bad cop and a good cop scenario. That I'm a good cop, I agree with you, but there are bad cops. If you don't do something, they are going to punish you, right? So that is why the peace deal reached a certain um, point right now. Very, I would say that political and very structural moments for even for Azerbaijan. That Azerbaijan understands that it has to do something. So Azerbaijan comes up with a certain additional comments just to make sure that after signing peace deal, it's not going to be punished by this good cop and bad cop scenario. And one of those issues is about change the constitution. So Azerbaijan wants to make sure that there's the possible change to the constitution, they can limit Armenian government and the certain actors that work closely with the Armenian government them to take certain actions against Azerbaijan. So, but again, it's a very long issue that I try to explain it very briefly. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much. And okay, well, I asked it already that okay, we don't have. Surprised we didn't have any questions. My question would be uh, the French supplies of the. Uh, uh, I don't know. Well, I had some issue. I had actually. I wrote down something from internet. Maybe somebody can enlighten me. Uh, there was some assaults on Azerbaijani human rights activists. Do you know anything about? I mean, I have a lot of questions to you, Ahmad. Azerbaijani human rights activist Vidadiz Kanderli was attacked in France in September 29, 2024. Before that, in March of 2021, Mahmoud Mirzali was Azerbaijani opposition leader and blogger was stabbed several times in Nantes. And besides Azerbaijani authorities recently, not recently, a year ago, they arrested a French citizen, Martin Rayan. Do you know anything about this? Is he still in?
I haven't heard anything about the first case. I have read few news about the second and the last case.
Yes, and the French citizen is still in prison, I believe. I just was wondering if he's still in prison. So what is going on? And France eventually recalled its ambassador from Azerbaijan. So do you accept that there is any, at least any, at certain points, there is any fault on France, or is this completely fault of France, or is there still a fault of the Azerbaijan at certain point?
Frankly speaking, I mean, I would love to listen to the experts on the legal issues, right? So they could explain much more on those
Yeah,
things.
I understand.
But
Yeah, not
what I can say that the French ambassador to Azerbaijan, she returned back after 2 weeks. So yes, she's back. So I mean, it's also I would say that it was a positive development. That there are certain I would say that there are quite positive developments taking place at some point that kind of media ignores those issues also. And also, I would say that sometimes it is uh, like should like whose public speeches are more important for the French-Azerbaijan relations? France ambassador in Armenia or France ambassador in Azerbaijan, right? I would prefer like this, these issues to be separated. But the French ambassador of France in Armenia, sometimes he can make certain comments, and in our days,
French ambassador in Armenia, you mean?
yes, that can Azerbaijani media picks up on certain issues, and that it gets quite a attention in Azerbaijan also. So it's a completely new information, right? The informational reality that we are living in. So sometimes, in the past, I would say that the diplomats would be, like the French ambassador would be quite in Armenia, that they would address certain issues toward the Armenian audience. The certain messages would be designed to please them. But the reality is that Azerbaijanis are reading the Armenian news outlets, the Armenian Telegram channels, and even Google Translate is quite a good tool to read the news in original language. So that is
Yes.
why sometimes that kind of statements, they also influence the whole the relation. So this is the reality. We have to take it account.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Okay, Mahi. And do you know anything about this attack on the Azerbaijani opposition leaders and opposition bloggers in France? Do you have any information about that?
No, I have no specific information. It was a bit covered by the French media, but not really prominent in the news. I don't think it has to do with French-Azerbaijani relations. And by the way, I'm struck that we keep discussing French-Azerbaijani relations, although the topic was supposed to be French-Armenian relations, but
they're vice versa.
there is a connection, obviously. So for me, this event with the incident with the Azerbaijani blogger doesn't have so much to do with French-Azerbaijani relations, but rather to Azerbaijan's relationship to its own opposition and activists in exile. I would not correlate it to the obvious crisis of bilateral relations that there is.
Okay, any other topics, any other ideas which we would like to discuss? Because, you know, I'm surprised. Usually I have usually I have so long list of questions that I'm always puzzled which questions I should pick up. But today something, I don't know how many people I have in the room. I don't see many.
Those break, you know, Mikhail, those break that we had for 4 months, so certain habits, they change.
Okay. I don't know, maybe not so many people in the room. Okay, do you have do you want to ask any questions each other? Do you want to raise any issues to discuss, or should we wrap up? Should we stop over here?
Everything is more or less clear.
Huh?
I would say that everything is more or less clear.
Yes. Okay. Well, then I guess we should stop over here unless somebody in the room wants to ask some question. I don't see anybody. Nobody wants to raise their hands. Okay. Okay. Oh my gosh.
We have
Yes.
someone who wants to ask question.
Okay, I don't see anybody.
Absolutely.
Yes, I see. For Marie, can you speak of France's perception of the Southern Corridor? Yes, please. What do you think about the French perception of the Southern Corridor?
So what do you mean by the Southern Corridor? Is it the land connection between Azerbaijan and Nakhchivan, or is it what is usually called, at least in the, okay, it's the
Yes,
connection between. Well, this is a key issue, I think, in France's approach to the current situation. As I mentioned briefly earlier, there are concerns that Azerbaijan may be tempted to resort to military means to establish this corridor, because it is clearly one of the strategic interests of Azerbaijan, something it has been pushing very strongly in negotiations. And there is a key issue of Armenian sovereignty, because it is Armenian sovereign territory. And so the 2020 agreement was envisioning a land connection that would be secured by Russian forces. That was in a different regional equation where Russia was still present in Karabakh to sort of protect the Armenian population in Karabakh, and would have been present along this corridor to make sure that it was safely connecting Azerbaijan and Nakhchivan. Now, Russia is not present anymore in Karabakh. There are no more Armenians in Karabakh. And so Armenia doesn't have the same kind of security cooperation with Russia in the first place. And there is also a very clear understanding, I guess, in Yerevan that this Armenia risks losing the control of its southern border in case it doesn't have full control of this corridor. So, as we said earlier, France is not involved in negotiations anymore, but it keeps a very strong focus on this issue, and is insisting on the fact that the issue should be solved in a way that preserves Armenian sovereignty.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much. There is anybody wants to add anything?
I can.
Yeah. Do you want?
If you mean by southern corridor, communications
Yes.
through Armenia, let us be honest, it's not about Nakhichevan, it's about Turkey.
Yes.
Communication from the main part, how to call it, the eastern part of Azerbaijan to Nakhichevan and then to Turkey. Theoretically, it would be okay to open borders between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And it was and is official position of official Yerevan. They even said that they are ready to open, if I'm not mistaken, 6 checkpoints at the borders and open the border for transport, for people, for goods, etc., etc. We don't need corridors,
Yes.
and we don't need, I don't know, Russians to move to Georgia, for example, or through Georgia to Russia, whatever. Why do we need corridors like that? If you talk about really that corridor is interest Azerbaijan, mainly even more interest of Russia. To have Russians at the territory of Armenia with not really control from Armenian bodyguards at the only 40 kilometers, 42 if I'm not mistaken, of border of Armenia of one of our 2 neighbors, real neighbors, open neighbors, I mean Iran. It is not very positive scenario for Armenia. So if you by corridor mean normalization of communications, yes, and we had negotiations about that, and they even if we had committees from both countries, and they already were on the technical level, because you have technical questions which I cannot talk about it for hours, but you can resolve. It's resolvable. It's doable. But they quitted from that process, really. If you talk about, kind of Danzig corridor from European history with just closed from both sides, no, it's not very positive. It's not very positive from at least Armenian side to have these better walls and people go here, people goods, I don't know, everything, maybe weapon, maybe soldiers, I don't know, through this territory is not the best way for normalizations of relationships.
Okay, thank you. I guess we have just 2 minutes left. I guess we should wrap up. We should stop over here. If Ahmad does not want to add anything. I guess we're here. I guess it's time for us to stop. There is one more question, but I don't quite understand this. Ethical consequences of the conflict. It does not quite make much sense for me. I'm sorry. But okay, let's stop over here. I would like to thank everybody who came over here, everybody who participated in this discussion, and thank you so much. It was a pleasure to see everyone. Thank you, and I hope to see everybody in the future. Thank you. You have a blessed day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.